The portion of Toldot has kuf vav pasukim, 106 passages, and the Masoretic note, the siman, the mnemonic of the Parsha to remember how many verses there are in the portion of Toldot is the word uloi. The word uloi is not a name like in most parshios, but rather it's a word. And this word is actually found in the Torah portion of Toldot. If you look into chapter 27, verse number 40, you'll find the word uloi in the parsha. Over there we find how Jacob blesses his son Esav. And he says to him, you should know that V'al charbecha sichya, by your sword shall you live. V'esachicha tavod, but your brother you shall serve. Esav must serve his brother Yaakov. Rome must serve the Jewish people. And then the prophet goes on to say, V'hoya, kasher torid ufarakta uloi me'al tzavarecha. However, yet it shall be that when you are aggrieved, why? Says Rashi. Because the Jewish people remove the yoke of the Torah, the Jewish people no longer study the Torah, and they don't fulfill your mitzvahs, your commandments, then you may cast off his yoke, the yoke of Yaakov, the yoke of the Jewish people, from your neck. So uloi represents his yoke, and that is the mnemonic of the Parsha. Why is uloi the mnemonic of the entire Parsha? What is the message here in the Torah portion? If you look into the Torah portion, there are basically three unique concepts. We start with the beginning of the portion. It starts with, these are the Toldot of Yitzchak ben Avraham. The Torah begins that this is the offspring of Yitzchak, the son of Avraham. Avraham, hoilid es Yitzchak, Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak. And all the commentaries ask, why the double language? If Yitzchak is the son of Avraham, don't we know that Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak? So why must the Torah portion begin at the very beginning of Toldot with this double language? Then it goes on to say that Yaakov and Esav were born, and v'yigdelu ha'na'arim, and they grew older. And Esav became an archer, a hunter, and Yaakov became a Torah scholar. Ish tam yoshev olim, he sat in the tent of Torah, and he studied Torah. And then it goes on to say that Akil kol Yaakov v'yadayim yidei Esav, that Yitzchak thought perhaps he was passing away. He told Esav, I want to give you a bracha, but prepare for me a dinner. In the interim, Rivka, the mother, hears what Yitzchak wished for, knowing that Yitzchak was blind physically, but also implying he also had a spiritual blind spot. So Rivka tells Yaakov, go and put on the garments of Esav. And when Yaakov comes to his father Yitzchak with the meal that his mother Rivka prepared, what does Yitzchak say to Yaakov? Hakoil kol Yaakov. The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands, I feel, are the hands of Esav. And then finally, he blesses Yaakov. And then Esav comes in afterwards. And Yitzchak gives Esav another bracha, stating, you will serve your brothers. However, if your brothers will remove the yoke of Torah from themselves, then you can remove their yoke from you. So how does all of these concepts fit together? But the answer is as follows. It's all about the yoke. What is a yoke? we find that a bar mitzvah boy, and similarly a bat mitzvah girl, the first mitzvah that they have on their bar mitzvah is to accept the yoke of God. The first mitzvah of a bar mitzvah boy or girl is to recite the evening Shema. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, God is our Lord, God is one. When a person says the Shema, what they are doing is they are accepting the yoke of God. So it's not only the first in time, but also the first in importance. And that is the foundation of the entire Judaism, is first to accept the yoke of God upon yourself. After you accept the yoke of God upon yourself, then you can accept the mitzvos, the 613 commandments, and then you can accept upon yourself the study of Torah. Similarly, we find that at the bar mitzvah of the Jewish people, Mount Sinai, when we accepted upon ourselves the Torah, we said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do, and then we will listen. We will do means we accepted the yoke of God upon ourselves, and then we will listen, we will begin to study the Torah and fulfill the Torah. So the yoke is the most essential thing. A yoke means a connection beyond intellect, because intellect is limited. It has its boundaries. It has its limitations. However, a yoke, which is something beyond intellect, has no limitations. And therefore, a Jew's connection to God is beyond understanding and beyond wisdom and beyond limitation. So we first accept the yoke of God. So the Torah begins by saying, Eile Toiles Yitzchak ben Avraham. How is it possible that Yitzchak, the son of Avraham, should have children? Physical children, but more importantly, spiritual children. What are the spiritual children of tzaddikim, of righteous people? Ma'asim tovim, good deeds, and limud HaTorah, the study of Torah. So how is it possible that Yitzchak is able to have all of these qualities of studying Torah, and to have grandchildren and great-grandchildren following in the ways of God in a world that is filled with evil and temptations and so many adversaries, so many negative influences around us? We are one lamb in the eyes of 70 wolves. So how is it possible that we maintain our identity, we maintain our commitment, we maintain our yoke? Says the Torah, you should know Avram Hoilides Yitzchak. It's because Avram gave birth to Yitzchak. Who was Avram? Says the Medrash, Echad Hay Avram. Avram was one person against the entire world. He was not intimidated. He persevered. He accomplished. And therefore Yitzchak, his son, has those genes. He has that power of his father Avram to go against all odds, to swim against the current. It says that what did Avram Avinu do? He went around and told people, Vayikra b'shem Havaya Kel Olam. And he called out and said, you should know, God is master of the universe. He didn't say Kel Ha'olam, God and universe. But God controls the universe. That there is a universe, and then there's a God, but God is stronger. God is mightier. He didn't say that. He said, Kel Olam, God is the universe. That there's nothing outside of God. That the physical structure and the makeup of the universe and the everyday world, that is God. He is Amitis Kol Hamotzoi. He is the actual reality, as the Rambam says, of everything that is found in the world. There's nothing outside of God. So when Yitzchak is raised in such a home of Avraham, where his father was dedicated to God's will and to promulgating the word of God throughout the entire world, and Avraham Avinu did this in a way of yoke beyond logic, then we understand how Yitzchak has the ability to do this. And that is the meaning, Vayigdulu hana'arim, that the children grew up. Yaakov grew up and Esav grew up. Says the Medrash, they became bar mitzvah. However, Yaakov, after his bar mitzvah, accepted the yoke, and Esav, unfortunately, did not accept the yoke. And that is the meaning of bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. The son and the daughter of mitzvah, of obligation. You accept the obligations, the responsibility of Torah upon you. But the Torah goes on to say that when they came for the blessing, and when Yaakov came for the blessing, his father Yitzchak says to Yaakov, you should know, Hakel Kel Yaakov, the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esav. Says the Medrash and the Zohar, you should know that when the voice is the voice of Jacob, when Jacob, the Jewish people, are studying the Torah, they're praying with their voice, then the hands of Esav are weak. Then Yadayim Yidei Esav. The hands of Esav are weak. But if the koil is not the koil of Yaakov, but if the voice is not the voice of Jacob, if the Jewish people are not using their voice to raise their voice in prayer, to raise their voice in Torah study, to raise their voice to inspire others to do more good, then what happens is Yadayim Yidei Esav, the hands of Esav become mighty and they become strong. There's a story in the Medrash that at the bar mitzvah of Yitzchak, it says Avram Avinu made Mishte Gadol. He made a big party. Why was it a big party? Did he call him the biggest caterer? Did he have sushi? Why made it a big party? So the Medrash says it was a big party because they had their kings, distinguished people that came to the party and made it a big party. That's a big party. Not a lot of people, but distinguished people. And one of them was Og Melech HaBashan, Og, the giant, the king of Bashan. And he's standing there and sitting there and eating sushi at the bar mitzvah. And he says, Avram Avinu is making a party, a bar mitzvah for his son Yitzchak. With one finger I can squash Yitzchak and make him into nothing. What's the big celebration? Says the Medrash that God responds, Chayecha. God says, I swear by my life that you, Oig, will see thousands and tens of thousands of children come out from Yitzchak, and his descendant will squash you with his hand. And that was Moses, who killed Oig Melech HaBashan. So on one hand, Yitzchak is one. On one hand, Avram is one. And you're standing now in the midst of a giant world that is contrary to Torah, contrary to mitzvahs. And technically, they can crush you in a moment. And logically, you don't exist. Logically, you're one lamb in the eyes of 70 wolves. Says the Torah, Chayecha, because the Jews accept upon themselves the yoke of God, which is supra-rational and illogical, God also illogically, beyond the laws of nature, protects the Jewish people and guides the Jewish people and brings success and blessing to the Jewish people. And this is the connection with 106 psukim in the Parsha, which is the word kav. Kav is a very Kabbalistic word. We are told when God created the universe, so God's light filled the entire world, and therefore there was no space for a finite world to exist. So God had to remove his space, he had to remove his light, and he created a black hole. He created a void, an emptiness. And then he brought a kav. He brought in a light into the world, and from this light, he created the finite world that we have today. That light, that rod, that line is called the kav. Kav is spelled kuf vav. Kuf is 100, and Vav is 6. Every letter in the Hebrew alphabet has a numerical computation, so Kav is 106. Comes the question to mind, what is the connection between Kav and the Parsha? So what is this Kav all about? Why does God have to create this Kav, this line or this rod or this measuring stick? So we are told that in the Kabbalah that the light of God is infinite. And therefore to create a finite world, God has to diminish his light. This is called, by the classical term in Kabbalah, it is called tzimtzum, a contraction of light. After God contracts his light, he brings in this kav, this measuring rod, this little line. It's a limited line. Why is it limited? Because it limits the light that comes into the world. And therefore, it allows us to have free choice. But more than that, it brings a limitation to everything that we do and everything that surrounds us, including Torah and mitzvahs. And that's why it says in the book of Sefer Yetzirah, the book of formation, which is the first work of Kabbalah, it says over there that Belamed Beis Nesiva is with 32 paths, with 32 mystical paths. Please, Chachma of wisdom, did God create the universe. What are the 32? So he goes on to explain that the 32 paths represent the 22 letters of the Aleph Beis and the 10 Sfirot, the 10 attributes. What does that mean? An attribute is a limited thing. It's a midah. We call an attribute a midah. A midah really means a measurement. A measurement has a limitation. So you have, for example, the midah, the attribute of kindness. No matter how much kindness you have, it's limited. Why? Because it's an attribute, it's a midah. It was made through this kav, through this measuring rod. You have the midah, the attribute of gevura, of severity, of judgment, but it's a limited amount. Because if it was unlimited, there'd be no room for anything else but that attribute. So each one of these attributes are limited. And the same is true with the 22 letters of the Torah. From these 22 letters of the Torah, God creates the 10 utterances of speech, which brings about the creation of the entire universe. Each letter is a limitation. It's a vessel that holds the light. It limits the light. So, in other words, we can say that the 10 attributes of these 32 paths of wisdom represent the 10 commandments that God gave us on Sinai, which from there came about the 613 mitzvos of the Torah. And then you have the 22 letters, which allude to the 22 letters of the Torah. In other words, you have the study of Torah and the performance of the mitzvos, which came about through this kav. Because in the mitzvah and in the Torah, there's limitation. You have only 613 mitzvahs, not 614. Not 612. The Torah is only 5 books of Moses, not 4, not 6. So even though you can study Torah day and night, and Torah is eternal, yet there is a certain limitation within the finite world that the Torah was created by the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. So in other words, this is uloi. What is the yoke of a Jew is the kav. The yoke of a Jew is this measuring rod that brought about the possibility for a Jew to perform the 613 commandments and to study the 5 books of Moses and the 24 books of the prophets and the 60 books of the Mishnah, etc., etc. And therefore they complement one the other. That is uloi, that is the yoke of a Jew. And when we remove this oil, when we remove this yoke, in other words, when we remove this kav, then unfortunately the powers of evil are able to reign, which are the powers of chaos, because there's no limitation, there are no boundaries. There's no longer good and bad. So So this is the message of the Parsha. And that is that we have the obligation to bring in God's light into this dark world. We bring God's light through the Kav, but to access this light, we have to study the Torah and perform the mitzvahs. And then by doing so, we truly make the world a brighter place. In the 13th year of my grandfather's rabbinic leadership, my grandfather, Rabbi Jacob J. Hecht, of blessed memory, the Lubavitcher Rebbe wrote him a letter, dated Chaf Cheshvan, the 20th of Cheshvan, in the year Tafshin Chaf Aleph. And it's also found in the 20th volume of the Hebrew letters of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And there he writes a letter to the synagogue of the Rabbi Simcha HaKohen, synagogue of East Flatbush, Meir Simcha HaKohen of East Flatbush. And he tells the congregation as follows. We are reading the Parsha of Toldot. It says over there, these are the offsprings of Yitzchak ben Avraham, of Yitzchak the son of Avraham, and Avraham, Yitzchak, Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak. So the Rebbe asked the question, why the double terminology? So the Rebbe said like this, there are certain children like Yitzchak, the son of Avraham, who say, wow, you know what kind of father I have? My father, he's the biggest chacham. He's the biggest tzaddik, he's the holy rabbi. My father is so smart. He's so brilliant, he's so holy. When he prays, the house is on fire, it's unbelievable. Says the Rebbe, there's certain congregations that they say, our rabbi is the best rabbi. He's so smart, he's articulate, he's dynamic, he's a tzaddik, he's an amazing personality. That's very, very nice. But says the Rebbe, that's not enough. It's not enough that Yitzchak ben Avraham, that the child should say he has a great father. We also need Avraham, hoiled as Yitzchak. The father should say, wow, you know what kind of a child I have? An amazing child. He's studious and he's committed and he accepts the yoke of God and he listens to his parents and he listens to his teachers and he outdoes his parents, he outdoes his teachers. This is nachas, to have children like this. Says the Rebbe that it's not enough that the congregation should extol the rabbi, but the rabbi should also have nachas and extol his congregation. And that is the meaning of Avram, hoiled as Yitzchak. Avram gave birth to Yitzchak. Avram was excited and took honor and pride in his child. So this is the message of the Parsha. It's not enough that we say, wow, our God is the greatest of all gods, and we are given the Torah, and then when God can do anything he wants. That's a beautiful concept. But God should also turn around and say, you know, my children, the Jewish people, they follow my Torah. They are light unto all the nations of the world. And we hope and pray that Hakel Kol Yaakov, that with the fact that we will have the voice and the voice of Jacob by studying the Torah, Hayadayim Yedei Esav, then the hands of Esav will truly become weakened. And the nations of the world will see the true light and give us the admiration and the confidence and the respect that is needed to go up to Jerusalem and to rebuild the third holy temple under the leadership of the King Mashiach speedily in our days.